Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah
Hello and welcome to Harmony in Diversity, a program that endeavours to encourage harmony and diversity across the wide range of faiths and beliefs here in Victoria, by showcasing individuals and groups involved in interfaith and multi-faith activities. In today's program, we take a look at the Fokolare movement of the Catholic Church, and a visit their local youth group went on to the Holocaust Museum, along with a group of Muslim and Buddhist friends. First of all, I spoke to Stephen Hall about the Fokolare's origins.
The Fokolare movement began in Italy, in Trent, in 1943, and it began with just a young woman. Her name was Chiara Lubick, but she called it like a revelation. A priest once said to her, "God loves you immensely," and for her this was a huge discovery that God is love. That everything that happened to her, everything that happens to all of us, there's always a plan of love behind it. So she began communicating this idea to a group of friends, and within no time this group had become a little community. And in wartime, Trent, under the bombs, they often used to go to the air raid shelters, this group of young women, and it was always a way of escaping death to go to the air raid shelter, and all they would take was just a copy of the Gospels, and they'd read it by candlelight, and they'd try to put into practice what they read. So do to others what you would have them do to you. So when they were running to the shelters, perhaps they saw elderly people, and to help the elderly people to go to the air raid shelter was to risk their lives, but they did it. But the key phrase that really struck them was when Jesus says at the Last Supper to his Father, he says, "Father, may they all be one as you and I are one." And that's what they felt called to try to work towards, this bringing unity to the world.
Can you tell me how it came about that this very Catholic movement became so involved in the area of dialogue with other faiths and with people of no faith even?
She always said that she didn't create the Fokolare. It was something that she tried to do by following God. And so the circumstances of her life led her to understand that this gift of unity she was called to bring to the world through the style of life she was teaching people to live. It wasn't only of use to Catholics, but also for Christians of other churches, and eventually she understood even people of other faiths were able to find things that were useful in this spirituality, which helped to bring unity between people of different faiths. Well, there are two moments that Chiara herself mentions. One of them was in Cameroon. There was a tribe called the Bangwa tribe who live in the mountains in Fontem. They had a very big problem with sleeping sickness. They had a very high level of mortality, and the local bishop asked the Fokolare to help these people. So the Fokolare worked over many years to help the local people help themselves. A hospital was built, and one of the first things they did was to research into sleeping sickness, and within a short time the mortality rate was cut dramatically, and the whole tribe was saved in a way. So the chief, he invited Chiara for a reception in the forest in Cameroon, and Chiara went there, and even though, as she said, the people weren't Christians, she said that the whole valley where they were seemed to be embraced by God in a sense. There was such a strong presence of God. And this was one of the first times she realised, well, living this way of unity wasn't just for Catholics or not just for Christians. Then later in 1977, Chiara received the Templeton Prize for Progress in Religion, and in the hall where she spoke, the Guild Hall, there were representatives of all of the major religions, And when she spoke of her experience as a Christian, how she tried to live for unity, she saw that the followers of all of the other religions were listening so intently, and she felt again that same presence of God who was present among them. And at the end of her talk, when she won the prize, it was the followers of the other religions who sought her out afterwards to speak with her. And then she realised, yes, God was calling her to bring this spirituality of unity also to people of other faiths, not just Christians. From the very earliest times, the Focolare community had people of every vocation, had young people, old people, people in religious vocations, but usually the vast majority of people have been lay people. So Kara felt called by God to help to work towards a new humanity. And to have a new humanity, you needed new people. And these new people could be formed in different ways according to their vocation or according to how they felt called. So within the Focolare, there are many different ways people can be involved. There are groups for children, right from toddlers upwards, up to youth groups. There are different callings for adults. Myself, I'm a consecrated lay person. We have also married people who come to be part of our community. They're still married people, they still live in their families, but they also come to share in our community life. We have people who feel called to holiness in the workplace and to bring unity into the workplace. There are people, as you've mentioned, of different faiths or even who don't have a religious faith behind them, but they all feel called to live for unity, and they find the Focolare spirituality helps them to do that.
Tell us a bit about how important your own Catholic faith is to you, particularly as a member of the Focolare movement, and how that impacts on your relationship with people of other faiths.
Well, I have to say that my faith is my greatest treasure. As a young person, I discovered that for me, Jesus answered all of the questions I had, about life and the mystery of suffering, all of these things. I found the answer in Him. With the Focolare, I found a way that I could live this to bring unity. So, for instance, when I think of how Jesus came from heaven, He gave up the majesty of heaven to become a creature like us. And that emptying, that gives me a great model. So if I'm listening to someone from another faith tradition and they're sharing with me about their faith, I try to be very empty of myself and listen really fully to understand what they want to tell me. And I've found that is a great richness that's allowed me to learn many beautiful truths that they have shared with me. Then for me, Jesus on the cross, when He cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" I see that as the great icon of who God is, because if we believe God is love and God is the Trinity, inside the Trinity it must be an emptiness of love for three to be one. So that mutual love and making space for the other is what I want to live with everybody I meet. So with people from another faith background, loving but also welcoming what they want to offer to me is my way of living the Trinity on the earth.
How has the movement here in Australia gone about fostering unity with other faiths?
Well, there's been two ways that I can see. Some of the contacts we have been through official interreligious groups. During the World Parliament of Religions in Melbourne, most recently, we were receiving guests in the Focolare houses and hosting them, guests we had met through the different contacts around the world. So there have been contacts at high levels, but I suppose the main way that we have these contacts is through personal friendships and personal contacts. So yes, through the people we meet, many friendships are built up, and these friendships turn into long-term relationships. I remember, to just give one example, there was a Muslim family we knew in Perth, and they were struck by the love of their neighbours. And they said, "Why do you love us?" And the neighbours said, "Oh, we're part of the Fokolare movement." And they said, "Well, what's this Fokolare movement?" And a beautiful friendship began between us and that family. And we were very struck. We had our Christmas carols, and people were coming dressed up as shepherds and what have you. And the Muslim family came, and they dressed their kids as shepherds and angels. So that was a lovely, lovely moment. Then to share the joy of other people is something that Jesus taught us. So, for instance, during Ramadan, we often have dinners together with Muslim friends. We might even fast with them to pray to God for peace, and then break the fast together. These have been beautiful moments. Recently, we've had the joy of meeting the Kadampa Buddhist group, and that meeting began just over a dinner with some friends. And one of the members of the Kadampa Buddhist group, he said that he was studying in Sri Lanka, and he was very struck by some of the Catholic nuns that he saw there, and he said he wanted to do something for them. So we said, "Well, we've got a big kitchen, we could help you cook scones." So we cooked 500 scones with him and his friends, and we sold them, and it was beautiful. When he stood up at the Mass, he said, "Look, I'm not a Catholic, but I'd like to help raise some money for some nuns that I met in Sri Lanka." And so we raised a good amount of money through that. So just through meeting people, friendships are formed, and from those we move forward. More recently, we continued together, also inviting some Muslim friends of ours, and we had a visit to the Holocaust Centre in Elstonwick, and that was another beautiful moment, and friendships formed there are also continuing. And we hope with the Kadampa friends to have a concert in our backyard during Harmony Week next year.
Tell us a bit more about the visit to the Holocaust Museum. How did the idea come about?
Well, the suffering of the Jewish people is quite a unique suffering, we would have to say. And there's a lot to learn from how they lived that moment of suffering, and if we can be aware of that, we can be part of the solution to make sure that never happens again. So we felt drawn to be able to share in that suffering they had, to learn ourselves how to live for peace, live for unity. So ourselves, the Kadampa youth, and two Muslim friends from the Islamic Research and Educational Academy, we went to this Holocaust Centre. It was a very profound moment of encounter, and I believe that it will be the start of a friendship that continues also with members of the Jewish community as well.
There was a gentleman, Henry, who showed you around at the museum. I was personally very struck by his story. How did Henry's story impact on you and on the other members of the group?
Well, obviously we lived an experience of pain, because the memories which Henry Korn shared with us were certainly not memories that were easy for him to share, and it cost him a lot. And then also for ourselves to hear so many true and difficult things also cost us. But I felt it was a moment of healing for both sides, and at the end we had such a great joy that for me as a Christian it was an experience of death and resurrection, that we had shared this suffering together, but arrived at a way of seeing each other as brothers. That was the experience, brothers and sisters, that was the experience we made. And the fact that we were from different religious backgrounds made it more poignant. It was a very profound and beautiful day.
Why did you do it?
After Henry began speaking about his experiences, it makes you realize the history behind the Holocaust and the suffering that he went through. And even just going through, walking around the museum was you didn't actually feel until you actually went in there and saw the images and learned about the suffering where it's can't really explain it. You just really feel it as soon as you walk around, and you learn a lot about the history of the Holocaust and the suffering that the Jewish people went through. I think knowledge of other faiths is important because we all live together, and there's a lot of different religions, ethnic backgrounds, traditions, and cultures in the world and in society, and I think just understanding them, understanding other faiths is important, just so we can live together in harmony.
Tell us about the youth group that you're part of and its involvement with the Fokolare youth group.
The Kadamba youth group originated about 2 years ago now. It's actually the first time in the Kadamba tradition that we have ever had the first youth group in the world. So it is quite an achievement for us. And in terms of the activities that we try to conduct, for example, is holding local community events that could try and involve the youth members, not just limited to Kadamba tradition or to Buddhism, but we try to engage people from all sorts of different faiths, and that is what our core beliefs are, to incorporate everybody and so that we can make a better local community. And early this year in April, we held a badminton quake appeal that was very successful in that we were able to fundraise over $1,000 to contribute to the Japanese earthquake and tsunami appeal. And after that, we have had other events where our members have gathered together in terms of our social activities and reflection events where we talk about why we believe Buddhism is so core to our lives, and we like to share this with with other groups such as the Fokolare. So today we just attended the Jewish Holocaust Museum in Elsternwick. There was a surviving victim who explained to us all about his experiences from the past, his memories, and the trauma, the devastation that has happened, but also the main message that he portrayed to us, that he wanted us to take back home, was the key fact of communication. Because where there are people, there are always going to be conflicts and problems, but the most important thing is conflict resolution, is how we communicate with each other so that we can solve the problems and issues that we may have. Through communication, we will be able to make a better world.
Deserving to go to paradise, or if you are not.
It's always pleasantly surprising to find groups of people who affirm that they belong to a certain faith, and they are faithful to that faith. They practice their faith. So a group of Catholic people with a number of Buddhists, which is in itself an odd mixture, and to young men, Muslims. Now, in the Muslim world, there is this propaganda that the Holocaust never happened. So very often we do get Muslim kids, even born here from Muslim families, who ask the question, why are we told it never happened? And that is a very difficult question to answer. And it's very difficult to explain that it did happen. I mean, you're talking to kids. The two Muslims who came with Focke-Wullah were already more mature. They were young men whom you could speak to, and explain. And they were willing to listen and willing to accept the fact that it did happen and that it shouldn't happen again. So that was the most useful part of this meeting, was my being able to talk to these two young Muslim men. One was from India and one was from the Mauritius, the island of Mauritius, but Muslims, that they were willing to come to the museum. They decided, well, look, let's test what we have been told is true or not true. So they made the effort to find out, which is basically required if we are thinking, intelligent thinking, human beings. We are told things, we must always test their veracity. This is essential in life, that we do not follow blindly what we are told, but at least try to make sense of it and see if we can find the truth of what we're being told and question.
What made the biggest impression on you today?
Biggest impression from today? For me, it must have been the joy of seeing three different faiths coming together. Because I think being in Australia, people take multi-faith and multiculturalism as something that's, they take it for granted. Whereas in a lot of different countries, it's quite secluded. You can just believe in one particular religion, and it's fairly difficult to have a certain type of freedom. Whereas here, to be able to see these different groups come together and hold an event to try and educate their youth members in terms of harmony and sharing happiness amongst different groups of people, I think that's the best part that I took from today.
That's all for our program today. For more information, and if you want to see this episode again, visit our website, harmonyindiversity.net. Also available there will be a long, raw interview with Henry Cohen, telling his story. Until next week, bye for now.
Shanti Om.